Thank you very much for tuning in. I, of course, am Rotype. Welcome back to Cedar Valley Redux, and sorry about that long time lapse. Funny story there. I actually recorded, maybe about half of that as a time lapse, and then the other half I recorded normally with commentary and going through everything in live mode. But I unfortunately recorded it all at 10 frames per second because that is the recording setting I use for my time-lapse footage, and I had forgotten to change it back. So I figured it would be a lot smoother to kind of redo a lot of the live portion, or at least redo some live portion, than try to have you all watch some 10 frames per second footage, because frankly I took a look at it and it 10 frames per second does not look good. Sometimes you can get away with 24 or 30, but down to 10, it looked choppy and it was no good. So we're going to do a mostly kind of review in the live section here, just because I've already put quite a bit of time into, like I said, the time-lapse section and then the live section that ended up being part of the time-lapse. So sorry about that, but rest assured, we did get some good work done if you saw it in the time-lapse, and we'll take a look here. And I like where the city's going, so hopefully you all will enjoy anyway. So the first thing, obviously, is I'm taking some time to look around at night. I mentioned this a little bit a couple episodes ago, maybe several episodes ago at this point, that I really like how the city looks at night, especially with this switch of the LUT I use. So in daytime, I normally use the After Dark Cooler LUT, but at nighttime, I think it looks just a lot better if I switch to the Clarity LUT, which is what you see I'm using right now. And I mean, even things like the fire just really shows up a lot better, I think, at nighttime with this LUT. So I think this just looks really good. And another thing I'll note is that this time, I can set the time to whatever I want with mods, obviously. And so I set the time to about 9 p.m., 8:30, 9 p.m., because if you get much later into the evening, the moon rises a little bit farther and actually shines a lot more down on the city, and you don't get this dark, contrast, I guess, that you would otherwise. It starts to lighten up a lot of kind of the grass areas and just other areas that I feel like would not necessarily be that light otherwise. And a good example is if we drop down in here to Mason Gardens, and you can see if I drop down in here away from the path, obviously there's plenty of light going on from the skyline and buildings nearby, and obviously the path has lamps on it and everything. But if you're out here in the forest, there's, it's dark. There's not much light out here. So I feel like this is a little more realistic, which is why I spend the time to switch my LUTs as I'm going into nighttime and then back out. So I really like how this looks. So I'm just going to take another few minutes just to look around. Sorry for these frame drops. I mentioned the video I took at 10 frames per second, and I don't think I get quite as bad as 10 frames per second, but sometimes when I'm moving around near the city with all the details we've been working on, the frames do drop. So just have to be a little bit careful about that. So just another quick look. Again, I just love how this looks at night. I think it looks really cool. Even if you take kind of a farther up shot, you get the different colors of the avenues and the boulevards and the roads. Obviously, it'll look a lot better as we can finish out Port McCarthy and kind of get it connected into the city. But even now, I think it's pretty cool. So I will go ahead and switch to, see here, I set it to about 8 o'clock, but I will switch it back to daytime. And in the meantime, before I switch to LUT, you'll notice how, it's not awful, but I do like to go ahead and switch the LUT back to After Dark Cooler, and it just, in my opinion, makes things look a little bit better. So we'll go through a couple things that I did off camera, and then just a nice little review of the things that we did in the time lapse that, like I said, unfortunately got converted into time lapse footage of its own. But the first thing I want to show is actually this extra little water treatment facility. I mentioned in the last episode that I added these two buildings to increase a water demand, or to meet an increased water demand that we had. And I think they looked pretty well. They kind of fit in to this little area, and I was left with this kind of weird crescent wedge shaped area. And so I was trying to figure out what I want to do about it and basically what to do with this space. And I ended up just kind of building this extra water plant. I think it looks pretty good. It's out of the way of any kind of residential office space area. It works in the transition into this kind of industrial area pretty well. So I just kind of stuck that in. As you can see, pretty minimal detailing, just some scuff marks and dirt and smudges and things. And I should highlight as well these Japanese warehouses that Ronix has made. I really like them, and I've been looking for excuses to use them. So look forward to seeing a bit more of those. But this is our first kind of little area that I worked on off camera. And if you'll pardon me for a second, I just noticed that I have forgotten to change my roads. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. This Roads United mod, you have to switch the texture pack back and forth every time you reload the map, which is a little, I mean, it's fine. Sometimes I forget. And also my ambient sounds tuner, also I have to switch every time. It's the little things that you have to do when you have a game as heavily modded as I do. I mean, I think I have close to 80 or maybe even more mods. So it's to be expected that some of them don't work quite as expected. But what else did I do off camera? A little bit more work in here. I don't remember how much of this was done in either a time lapse or the end of last episode, but just still working to kind of clean up this area or dirty up this area as the case may be, and just make it look a little bit more realistic. You'll notice I do have a bus depot here. So we're going to, in the very near future, actually finally get some mass transit done. But before I speak more on that, I'll just move on and save that for another episode. The biggest difference is really this wedge area. Now, if you remember, this was just this kind of vanilla, plain old grass, the default grass. And I was trying to think of a good way to get buildings in. Obviously, you need a road to get in there to build buildings off of. And it would look weird, at least in my opinion, to go up the hill from Harris Boulevard here. And especially with all these buildings and the train lines, I think it also would have been kind of odd to bring a road in this direction. So I went ahead and grassed it all, this unkempt field thing I've been doing with all these other areas. I'm going to go ahead and pause the simulation, see if we can get a couple extra frames. So as you can see, there's this large, it makes this area that used to just be kind of in here, all the way down here, makes it a large unkempt area, which I think it looks good. The one thing I'm undecided about is if you zoom out here, you can see these pieces are all kind of detached. So there's kind of this area, which I have yet to rename, but Loft's Old Industrial District is kind of here. And then South Side is here. And then the warehouse district almost has two pieces. It has like this piece, which is almost an island, and then this piece. So I might try to find a way to bring them together a little bit. And actually, now that I'm sitting here, I think I do want to just see how this looks. But I'm looking for a way to not leave these so isolated. So let's just see what this does. Now it's going to screw with the zoning a little bit. So I am going to, okay, good. They're all zoned to be the correct thing. So I'm going to see what this does. And I'll turn this into a gate because, like I said, this is not really attached. So I think if we get them attached, it'll look a lot better. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to bulldoze a lot of these. Probably have to replace quite a few of them, but doesn't hurt to just get them cleared out so we can see a little bit more what we're doing. Let's see, I think these are some dirt decals. There we go. And the rest of these grass props. There we go. That should be good enough for now. So I'll turn this on and hopefully these will grow. And in the meantime, whoops, I do not want to bulldoze that. No. There we go. So I'll see if I can get an industrial fence. No, I don't want the fence. I want the gate. Industrial gate. We'll just drop one of these in, and then hopefully when those growables come in, we'll be able to connect the areas a little bit more, because that was the one thing I was a little bit unhappy with, is the fact that these areas were a little bit detached. And, I could possibly just pave in a couple areas, throw in a few buildings, and that would do it. But like I said, right now you see just a lot of dirt that just works like a barrier, and it doesn't necessarily need to be there. So just trying to work to get these things a little bit nicer, a little bit more put together. I believe there's an extra piece of dirt and bush here we can get rid of. And let's see what grows in here. And you know, I was talking about Ronix's Japan warehouse buildings. This might be another place where I can just use them, because there's always a lot of corner work, I guess is the best word for it. You know, you zone in things and you get these corners that don't necessarily grow in very well. So we'll see what we can do. And like I said, the Japanese workshop, the Japanese warehouses will probably go pretty well in here. I'm just going to bring back the gravel for the actual train tracks. There we go. Now, yeah, so it looks like, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up to see if I can accelerate this process, but looks like we're going to be left with some gaps. And that is where, let's see, Japan. There we go. Got our little warehouses here. And if I drop them, let's just say there, let's see if it'll grow. Looks like it's on its way. We might have to play a few of the games that we're, kind of used to playing, just fill in the gaps kind of thing. Yeah, unfortunately this is going to be a little big out on the road, but maybe I'll just drag it. Yeah, it looks like it's really not going to fit anywhere. So we'll have to play, like I said, play these little games with scooting things together. See, I'll grab one of these. That's going to be too big. So looks like, unfortunately, we're just going to have a lot of these type of buildings, which might get a little repetitive, but I'm really after the roof line more than anything else. The roof line and the street front. I've said this before about the residential areas, but if you get kind of the shape looking right, you can forgive a couple textures clipping in and out. At least that's my opinion. So we'll move this one back a little bit as well. And if I exit, move it. There we go. Yeah, so see, now the shape is better. And even though a couple, roof textures are clipping through, I think it looks fine. So we're just going to go ahead and finish that up here. Just add one there, and then just one to round the corner. There we go. So that takes care of that. And I'm okay with this kind of being a little bit open here. There are a few details I'll probably have to do, like maybe put in some parking and fencing and stuff. But now if we take a look back, this is a little bit more integrated together. Now there's still this gap going on between this area and this area, which I think can probably be fixed by just paving in maybe here and here. Let's see, am I gonna get any buildings growing there? It looks like not. But if I take some of these 1x2s, it looks like they will fit. So let's just see what this looks like. That didn't, never mind, that was an autosave. Apologize for that jumping around. Autosaves get you at the worst time. So let's just fill in a few of these and see how this looks. Luckily, I'm just barely inside the tracks. Yeah, I think this will look good. So I'm just gonna do a few more here. And this will, I think, accomplish my goal of making things a little bit more connected. Well, it looks like I'm a little bit off on my curvature. I'm gonna have to go back and fix some of these. Turn them just a little bit. It looks like unfortunately, I forgot to get rid of the trees underneath, or these things, what are they called? Grass, shrubbery. Let's see if I can grab this one and move it in a good place. Looks like not. I'll just go with this one then. A few of those. And then if we're lucky, what I can do is grab only trees. And these will select. Yeah, there we go. I can get rid of those so they're not taking up my prop and tree count underneath. Oops. There we go. Now, if I pave this area, it doesn't look so weird, I don't think. Let's go to a bigger pavement. There we go. So we have the dirt, making it look a little bit more like train tracks, and we can just run this to there. We don't need to run it all the way out or anything. I am going to get rid of these grasses I just placed. And we're going to have to use move it for that, but that's fine. Grab this tree, delete. And I believe decals are a prop. Yes, delete. So now I can go back to dirt. Grab some of these kind of smudgy, some streaks maybe. And damage, probably one of the most useful decals around. We'll flip this way. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but just even throw in some of these other, well, maybe not that one. Some of these other ones in the area. You know, this feels like it needs something. Maybe an old curb. Unfortunately, these are all kind of nice, but just put one in. At some point, somebody put a nice little curb placement there. There we go. Now it's a lot more attached, like I said. It's a lot more connected. And you know, I really kind of want to do this area as well. So I'm just going to actually use a brush just to connect the pavement. That did not work the way I thought it would. I believe I have this painted. Yeah, there we go. I have that painted underneath, which is why. I do want this to run right up like this. And I don't know, maybe a forklift or two. Just stick a few of these in. Some pallets. Bunch of junk that somebody left too close to the train track. That's fine. And as always, damage. Asphalt damage. Right there on the edge of the railroad, and again on the edge of the dirt. And you know what? These would probably have some Jersey barriers. If I could spell Jersey. There we go. And these are to protect you from getting, you know, hit by a train. Maybe being pretty lazy about it, but not in line or anything, but, and you know what? Let's just add, again, a few more protection barriers here. Oops. And again, just anywhere there's going to be people. Good. Yeah, so that looks a lot more connected now, which is I like a lot. Again, there's still the question of this area, but we'll see how that goes. Now, of course, the rest of what was done during the time lapse was build mostly this mall, which, as you can see, is several pieces. It's actually not going to let me select most of them, I think. Oh, no, well, okay, I just can't see the highlighting. But there's the Skyline Mall entrances, which are this front piece and this back piece. And then I've clipped in the Macy's and the Dillards. And my strategy here was pretty much to use these curbed roads strategically with the non-curbed roads, because I've talked about this before. A lot of this game looks kind of weird because of the curbs or lack thereof. So obviously this curbed road, if you were going to this parking lot, you would not just ramp the curb and go into the parking lot. So if you didn't actually build this little, you know, stub of a street, as far as the game is concerned, it wouldn't build a break in the curb, and it'd be a little weird. Obviously, both from this kind of regular road and from that alley road, there are full-on curbs. So that was my strategy, just going around, again, building the ring road like you usually see, or at least I'm used to seeing around most malls, and then a ton of parking, but being careful about how the parking is accessed. You need to break in the curb to get into parking lots. So just wanted to focus on making sure each of those parking lots had an appropriate curb break to get in. And there's obviously a lot of detailing work left to be done. These parking lots that exist now are the big ones that I could plop easily and just kind of move into place without having to really get into the details and doing props and all these other things. But this is, I think, a good start. And I really like how it's looking, especially you kind of zoom out. And again, it kind of connects the area. As I'm building the city, it's really, I don't necessarily have a grand plan, but I want to build something and then I want to be able to merge it in with what's already there. So that brings me over to Clayton Strip, which is my little, I guess, sort of kind of homage to King Lino. I know it doesn't really make that much sense. Doesn't really sound like King Lino, but in my head, it's King Lino. I don't know. But this is my homage to King Lino, mostly because a lot of these box buildings, big box buildings, are his. So number one, they're awesome. Number two, shout out to him. And number three, I think they look really good here. I went ahead and elevated this rail line here. And as you can see, just put these little bridges. It's all, earth elevated except for the bridges over the avenues, because I felt like these avenues are not quite suburban enough to have level crossings. There is still one over here, which I'm undecided. I might make that one elevated as well. I'm not sure. But for now, these kind of more urban ones all have non-grade crossings. So the train can just cruise and traffic can just go without worrying about it. And that left me with this little strip. Now, I know I've talked about having a commuter path, and I do still have a plan for that to go in here. But I was looking at this end and trying to decide what I wanted to do with the commuter path. And I decided it would just be, I think, a little bit difficult to do something with it. If I brought it on a bridge over here, it would end up in a weird place. Do I stick it in here? So I decided to end the commuter path here. And as you can see, if you look sharp, this road, Daffodil Boulevard, it apparently is, has now bike lanes. So this will take you all the way into the city, and then you can catch Ralston Boulevard if you want, or you can go all the way down to a waterside street. Anything you want to do. This is kind of the new commuter way into the city. But similar to the mall, Clayton's strip here is not quite detailed all the way, but it was just kind of an effort to get through the area, figure out how I want things laid out. And again, like I said before, using a combination of these alley streets with the plain streets mostly for curb placement. And I was going to put a lot of bollards up here and all these other things, but this was a way to get everything laid out in a way that I think it looks pretty good and makes sense. So last but not least, in the beginning of the time lapse, and I believe a lot of off-camera work as well, was put into this garbage plant. And this came out really well. I was pretty happy with this, especially for the amount of effort. Sometimes when I'm working on something, it just takes a lot of effort to get in and really think about and figure out what I want to do. This one came pretty naturally. I was just kind of fiddling around with all of these ones with the solar panels on them. That is a Vanya project. She built a lot of these, all of these with the solar panels on them in this kind of collected garbage plant area. And so I was just kind of plopping those around, and this layout came, like I said, pretty easily. I didn't have to think about it that hard. And then this recycling center is a different setup, and I apologize, I forgot who made this, but just kind of tucked it in next to it. You have a bunch of parking, and as you can see, it's not quite done. There's still this empty space over here to work with, but I think it came out really well. I've started to doing a little bit of the detailing, some dirt and scuff marks, and all these prop cars that are needed. And the one thing I kind of like this a lot, is how this landfill is actually a separate piece. This kind of, you can almost kind of see, because unfortunately you can't get decals above the landfill, so this line shows up pretty sharply. But I think I did a decent job of putting jersey barriers along most of it to make it not be quite so obvious. But this is separate from this building, and I just clipped them together. And frankly, I think this looks really good. I was kind of just trying to squeeze the landfill in somewhere, and this is where it ended up. And it works as a nice corner to this boulevard and avenue intersection. And the building here, I guess these are clipped a little bit, but for the most part, you look at this building and that looks like it could just be the way it is. So I'm really happy with that. And like I said, the rest of this is just filling in a couple buildings, working on a couple layouts, and as always, working on curbs, giving these little street entrances to parking lots and whatnot. So this is, like I said, obviously not done yet, but I think this came out really well, and I'm pretty happy with it. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for this episode. As always, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and again, sorry about all that time lapse, but rest assured I will be watching my recording settings very carefully in the future. Remember, if you want to see more, to give this video a thumbs and subscribe. I will be back next week. Until then, my name has been Rotype, and I'll see you next time.